is yours is mine. So I'm laying down my life again, yeah. And I will testify that you tore the veil that stood in between my heart and your mystery. Show me your ways, show me your ways, show me your ways, Jesus, show me your ways.
Well, hello everyone. This is Byron from David C. Cook and Ministry Spark. How many of you this very second around the world that's coming into this conversation, you're like, I needed that song. I needed to hear that there is someone who can show you the way. And Beth G, if you listen closely, it's actually show you the ways. So it's not only the way, but it's the ways. There's multiple incredible ways that we can reach people with the gospel. And so here we are today in a three-part series. We kicked it off last week with basically what is trauma in this series titled Leading Trauma, Informing Ministries. Now, let's be clear. I've been in this space for a long time. This is not one of those conversations that's a warm and fuzzy. You don't, church calls and says, hey, B, could you come and do some training? It's normally not on trauma. But the one we have today and the one that we had, the panel that we had last week that led us, they are the ones who are speaking in this space and bringing light and bringing the Holy Spirit and bringing healing and bringing redemption and bringing a reset to the way you were and what has happened in trauma. You can find healing. And today, who better than my incredible friend Beth Guckenberger, who lives this? There is no one. I was doing some coaching yesterday with a church and a children's pastor, and I told her as she came on staff, there is no one better for you in this role right now, in this season, at this church in Idaho than you. And there's no one better for us and for you who are coming in to hear Beth G. Guckenberger, who many of you, come on, let's face it, we've heard her many, many times. And whether it be a webinar, we've hosted her a number of times, or whether it be at Kids Matter or Children's Pastors Conference, which she will be at the CPC in 2026. You'll want to see her. She'll be on the stage, and it'll be a moving message as always. Uh, but today we're really inviting Beth to go in a place where trauma exists and helping children to depend on God, to lean in to God. And I don't know a lot about trauma. I'm learning, but it seems a lot of times when trauma hits, and there's degrees, Beth, of trauma, you tend to pull back and you tend to hide. And what Beth is going to call us into is lean into. As a friend of mine said, go to the difficult. Go where it's difficult and find God there in the difficult spot. So, I know you get tired of me saying this. This is going to be another good one. And I know that this is going to be as last week. And again, last week's talk, What is Trauma, is archived. You can find it. You need to find it. You need to use it. This is our expression at David C. Cook. And the beautiful thing about Beth with us today is she bleeds ministry like I do, and everybody that has put this webinar together, and who David C. Cook is. We're not a business, we're a ministry. And this one here is a minister and also our board chair. So for you who are using David C. Cook of any degree, this is who's at our helm. And for you who would maybe consider David C. Cook. And I don't know much, check us out, because that's the one at the helm. And that one at the helm, Beth Guckenberger, it's really not Beth, it's God and then Beth. And so we were together last week. She walked off the stage as we were celebrating 150 years of ministry at David C. Cook. And it was a fist bump off the stage saying, we're going to take the gospel to the world. So come be with us as Jesus shows us right the way to do that. So come in, get comfy. I want you to do one thing before I give it to Beth. Uh, I want you to grab a pen and a piece of paper if you would, or if you just want to mentally do this. I think Beth's okay with it, but I want you to think about your ministry right now. And I want you to think of a child, a family, another child, a few more families that are so deep in trauma right now. The only rescuer, I mean, really, come on, the only one who can rescue and put on a higher ground is God the Father and Jesus Christ. Would you write in privacy, would you just note their names? And as Beth comes to share with us, may her words pour over you, but also pour over the few or many that you have noted. And just ask God to be present and use this talk in your ministry for the glory of the Lord and for your ministry. That's who we are. Beth Guckenberger comes to us from Back to Back Ministries. She is a advocate. Uh, I don't even, Beth, come on now. Uh, she's one of those where she is just so gifted in many, many areas. But I think she is one who just absolutely loves the least of these and pours fuel on that. And her ministry is incredible, amazing. God is doing incredible things around the world with you, Beth. She's also a preacher, a teacher, an author. We're blessed to have her at David C. Cook as one of our authors. We just love her to death. So, Beth, we prayed over you, and I know that you're anointed. So, as you come and you speak to children's pastors from around the world, who them they them whatever I'm trying to say, they themselves could very much be dealing with some trauma themselves. So take the floor. May God be with you. We love you, Beth. Thank you.
Thanks, Byron. Hello, community. Gosh, I've been looking forward to this opportunity to talk to you about this very tender topic of trauma. Thanks for saying hello, Ashley. See, I'm paying attention to the chat. So that was going to be my first announcement is I have content for days. I mean, this could become a 3-hour webinar without any hesitation. It will not be, I promise you. And even though I have a plan and slides and content prepared, I really want it to feel like a conversation. So I'll be paying attention to the chat at the same time that I'm presenting. And if there's a question that you have, either about something I just said or about something adjacent to that, I welcome a disruption, as I think all children's pastors do. We are familiar with the idea that disruption might actually be God's curriculum. I had a plan, and I prayed about my plan, but He may have a totally different set of messages to get delivered today, and I want to be responsive to it. So, just know that the chat box is available to you for us to have real-time conversation. Also, if I've ever talked with you or in front of you before, you know that I'm kind of heavy on inspiration, heavy on instruction. I like to open my Bible and teach Hebrew words and tell stories. And there'll be some of that today, but I also want today to feel really practical. So we'll have some very practical slides coming throughout the middle and towards the end of the presentation, because I want you to feel like you shut your computer and kind of know what to do, at least in terms of first steps. And then my last disclaimer is Courtney put in the chat box earlier a couple of free resources from the organization that I lead, free trauma training. It's online, on demand, and completely free. And there's lots of tools with that, regulation cards and tools. So if this gives you a taste, we have hours and hours and hours and hours and hours more of this kind of training available to you if that's in any way helpful. We just want to serve you. Okay, before we get started into the slides, the first picture I want to show you is a picture of a church I took with my iPhone. That picture is a picture of a church in modern day Turkey, or what we know as biblical Asia Minor. And I just took this with my iPhone recently when I was there studying. And I think I just wanted to start here because whenever we talk about the topic of trauma, we're talking about people who are hurting. We're talking about people who have experienced very, very hard things. And we all have our natural reactions to hard, right? Some of us run away from it because it's painful. It's hard to be around people who are hurting. Or some of us get critical or judgmental of people in hard because that's just our nature, and it sometimes flares itself up. Or sometimes we feel helpless or hopeless about it. Like, I don't know how that's ever going to turn around, and I don't know what I can do about it. Like, we kind of all have our natural reactions to hard. But one of the things that has lately been putting some steel in my spine about working with people who have a trauma history is the fact that I'm a part of a really old story, that we are not just now coming up with it, even though we've heard the phrase trauma training in much more frequency since COVID, that God's been asking his kids to go close to traumatic events since the very beginning. And so this picture I took with my iPhone when I was standing in the biblical ruins of the town called Sardis. And we read about Sardis in Revelation 3. That's the church that, this is my paraphrase, but basically said, John writes to them, I know there's some of you who have not had your robes bloodied. And the reason he says that is because in Sardis, they were worshiping Kibla, or a fertility goddess. And the way that they worshiped her was that they would dress in white robes and they would flog themselves just until their robes were bloodied. And because she was a goddess of fertility, the way they worshiped her was through some pretty grotesque and perverted sexual practices with animals and children and strangers and in groups and all the things. And so I want you just to put yourself in the shoes for a minute of the disciples who watched Jesus's ministry and his death and his resurrection. And 50 days later, they got the Holy Spirit and they were sent out with that great commission. And they head out in the world to tell people about the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on water and all the good news that comes with the gospel. And they show up and they walk to this town. And the reason Turkey is such an important town biblically is because it's the cross section where the east and the west were meeting each other. And so they went right to that spot so that they could establish a church. So as people were heading east to west and west to east, they would cross God's kids doing God's work in God's house. And they show up in Sardis, and these people are bloodying themselves with their self-harm, and they are in perverted sexual practices. And I think if I was a disciple, I'd be like, listen, this is crazy town over here. These people are crazy. I'm going to go and set up our church 5 miles away from here, where none of this, I don't have to look at any of this, and none of this gets on me. And I took my iPhone out and took this picture because what you see on the right side of the picture is like the ruins of an old temple. That was a temple to Kibla, that white section. 2,000 years later, it's still basically standing. I mean, obviously it's the ruins, but it was a pretty established building and practice in that town. And why I love it is that the picture on the left, or that little brick building, is the ruins of an early evangelical church. And where did that church decide to set up? Not 5 miles out of town, where they wouldn't be near the traumatic events that were happening to the people who were worshiping a false god. They got as close as they possibly could get to that temple. And we don't know exactly what they did when they got there. I'm hoping they passed out Band-Aids and water bottles, that they were as practical as possible about the felt needs of the people who had experienced trauma. But what we do know is that in a pretty short period of time relative to history, the worship to Artemis and Kibla fell, and Christianity became the dominant faith in the region because God's ways work. And it's my favorite square footage in all of Turkey. And when I stand there, you can stand between those two buildings, and I put my hand on the white building and I put my hand on the brick building, and I make a commitment to the Lord every time I'm there. Lord, take me as close as you can to the most chaotic of places and teach me what it looks like to look like you there. And that's really going to be the heart of our time together, what it looks like to get to some of the most chaotic storylines that are happening in your ministry world, and how to look like Jesus as much as possible there. One of the first trauma trainings I took maybe 10 or 15 years ago, this trauma instructor was helping us at our organization. If I haven't met you yet, my husband and I lead an organization for orphan and vulnerable children in lots of places around the world, and we've been doing it almost 30 years. And we were getting this trauma training, and this instructor, Dr. David Schooler, was talking to us about anger. So Byron asked you to think about a child that you know that's hurting. Possibly the way that you know that they're hurting is because they've demonstrated some anger in your presence. That's not everyone's trauma response, but imagine a child that you know that, or an adult or whomever that's angry in any of its forms, passive or aggressive or whatever. And this instructor was telling us that anger in all of its forms is really a secondary response to the primary emotion of fear. And when we are angry, we're actually afraid. We just don't always know what to do about it. We don't have the words for it. And so how it gets expressed through ourselves is sometimes in anger. And so the challenge was given to us when somebody comes in at you hot. We usually have some choices. We either run away from the heat because that's scary to us to see someone like that, or we might try to match their heat. That happens to me sometimes. Or sometimes we try to get hotter in order to subdue them. But the challenge was given to us. What if instead of reacting to their anger, what if you thought of yourself as like a little emotional detective, and you tried to discern what actually might they be afraid of? They're having trouble articulating. And for children, happens all the time. They experience fear. They don't know exactly even what it is. And it just explodes inside of them. And if I can figure out what their fear is, I might have a chance of alleviating that fear or addressing that fear or ministering to that fear and watching the behavior reduce as ministry actually happens. And we were learning about this, and I'm taking all these furious notes in my notebook. A couple of days later, my husband and I, after dinner, we were cleaning up, and then he said, we were building a house in that season. And he's like, hey, he pulls out the house plans. He's like, hey, I was just thinking, I wanted to let you know that over here in the part of the house where we had a guest room, I think I'm going to put a bathroom over there because I think it'll be nice for guests to have a private bathroom or whatever. And he wasn't even really asking me. He was kind of more telling me. And I said, I don't think we need a bathroom over there. And he's like, no, I think it'd be great because the organization we lead has a lot of missionaries, and they come and stay with us sometimes. He's like, I think it'll be nice for them to have that. And I was like, no, look at all the bathrooms. If they want to go to the bathroom, they can go over here and over here and over here. And I'm pointing to all the places on the drawings. And he was like, no, actually, I think we're going to do it. And it was kind of playful at first, but I don't know how this happens in your household. One minute I was talking to him about his bathroom, and the next minute I was talking to him about his mother, right? I mean, I was getting kind of worked up about the conversation that wasn't really supposed to be a conversation. And as things were escalating in my house, he's starting to escalate with me, because that would have been a pattern of ours at the time. And then he stops and he's like, I'm thinking about that training we took earlier this week, and I can tell you're angry, so that must mean you're afraid, but I can't figure out what's so scary about a bathroom. Like, what's going on with you? What are you afraid of? And in that moment, I didn't want to be like, okay, well, let me do some self-reflection, and I'd be happy to tell you about what I'm afraid of. Like, in that moment, I was feeling all the big emotions. And that's what happens when we interact with a child who's angry. If we just flat out ask them, what are you afraid of? They're not going to answer you. Nobody wants to answer that. You're angry. You're having big feelings. But I took a moment to think about what he was saying. And I said, okay, I think I'm afraid we can't afford it. And as soon as I said it out loud, I could feel myself starting to calm down. And he got out his spreadsheets and it's like, oh, that's what you're afraid of. And he shows me all his numbers. And as soon as I got that fear relieved, I said, okay, well, in that little bathroom, I'd like a double sink and some brushed nickel, please. You know, like it was over because I had the thing that was scaring me addressed. And so with children, they may not be able to take a beat and follow you in that, but it's still our responsibility to help understand what they're afraid of and help move them out of that part of their brain where they're afraid into the part of their brain where their executive functioning happens. And so let's just get started with what we know trauma to be. There are lots of definitions of trauma. This is Dr. Dan Siegel. He's one of my favorite resources. He says trauma is an experience that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope. So ultimately, what we want to do is give tools to adults and to children that we serve so that they can heal, right? So that they can stay safe, so that they can create connections. And the next slide shows this. This is like a visual that I draw all the time for volunteers and people that are serving with us. I just draw them a picture of like a circle, and I write the word child. And if it's important, if it's somebody who's doing mentoring, or you might be able to just write the child's name in that, right? Like there's a child, and that child might be having, if they've experienced trauma, then two things might have happened. Either bad things happened to them or good things didn't happen to them. And there are good resources out there, physical resources to hydrate them and fuel their bodies, emotional resources to help them process the hard things that happened, like tons of resources. But what we need is someone to function like a middle circle. And that is the safe adult that bridges the child that has need with the resources they need in order to heal. Because kids who have had trauma don't need fixed. These are not problems to be fixed. These are stories that need healing, and the way that healing happens, because trauma happens in relationship, healing happens in relationship. And if you as a safe adult can bridge the needs of the child with the resources that they are lacking, then healing can begin. And I see Christy is asking what might be a better question to ask when we see anger and sense fear. Let me jump ahead and answer that question. And so you'll see the slide coming up in a minute, but it says brain development is relationship dependent, right? This idea, the one after that, the idea that because trauma happens in relationship, healing happens in relationship. And so here's the question I would ask. But first, let me just tell you 2 seconds about about our brains. Right behind our ears, we have these little almond-shaped glands called amygdalas, and that's where the fight, flight, or freeze are registered. And the front of our brain here is what we call our prefrontal cortex. That's where problem solving, cause and effect, creative thinking, all the good stuff happens up here. The prefrontal cortex and the amygdala cannot work at the same time, and the amygdala wins every time. So if you have a child that's already expressing some kind of big behavior, they're either crying because they're afraid and they're able to say, I'm afraid, and demonstrate that, or they're angry because they're having trouble express their fear. Either one, they're activating back here in their amygdala. A question of we could not craft a good enough question that will get kids up here in their prefrontal cortex to answer for you. I'm afraid because I haven't seen my mom. I'm afraid because I didn't get to eat breakfast. I'm afraid because that child smells like somebody who's hurt me before. I'm afraid because I don't know how to read. And you just like their answers to why they're afraid are endless, but they're not going to be able to answer that to you if they're already back here in an activated amygdala. So the first thing you have to do when you see someone having big behaviors is get them, this is not a technical term, out of their fear brain up here into the front of their brain. So the first things we need to do are co-regulating behaviors. So think about a dysregulated child is what you're looking at. A self-regulated child is someone who understands how to soothe themselves and meet their own needs. A co-regulated child is someone who is responding to the needs of an adult who is trying to help them get out of their amygdala and up here in their prefrontal cortex. So we co-regulate kids in all kinds of ways. One of the first things I always recommend is to give a glass of water. A dehydrated brain is an irritated brain. And so even just the intervention of a water can help begin to co-regulate a child. In fact, there's a study out of the University of Chicago they did in Chicago Public Schools where the only intervention they gave to a elementary school that was having trouble with some child-on-child violence is that they gave them unlimited access to water bottles, and they saw the significant reduction on that child-on-child violence just with the presence of water. So I would give away as much water as you could possibly give. But there's lots and lots of ways to co-regulate a child. Sometimes it's by sitting next to them. Sometimes it is by giving them a fidget. Sometimes it's by giving them a snack. Sometimes it's taking them for a walk. We'll talk about all kinds of ways to co-regulate in a little bit. But once you find them begin to get out of that fear brain and have a more regulated emotional response, then you can ask them questions around what you sense or discern might be their fears so that you can address that. But that was a great little rabbit trail, Kristen. Thanks for that question. Continue to ask them. Okay. So back to that tree that we jumped over a minute ago. Thanks, Marie. I was a foster parent for 10 years, lots of material from that season of my life. And I was a foster parent for adolescent teen girls. And I was having one teen girl that I was not let's just say, getting through to. She was bringing a lot of tension into my home for about 3 years. The interactions were becoming increasingly uncomfortable, and not just for the two of us, but for everyone else in my household. And finally, it got to a point where I cried out for help. And I had this guy, Dr. Kyle Miller, who came to my house for a few days. And I just said, challenge me in anything you want to. Ask any question you'd like. Like, what we're doing right now is not working. We're just doing the same things over and over again. We're having the same dance over and over again. And after he witnessed an exchange she and I had had before school about something she was wearing that was inappropriate, he drew me this little tree. He drew it on a napkin, not this pretty, but he labeled this tree in 3 parts. He said that the foliage of her tree is like her attitude and actions. He's like, Beth, I've been watching you for a few days, and every interaction you have with her is in regards to her attitude and actions. You're talking to her about her chores and her curfew and her cell phone and her facial features and her, I mean, he like went on. And her attitude. And he's like, you know what happens? You know anything about horticulture? When you cut off the top of a tree, it literally grows back twice as strong. And I was like, can I get a witness? And the fight that he had witnessed us having was really about a miniskirt she was wearing to school. And he said that little girl did not walk out of this house in a miniskirt because she's trying to offend you. It actually has nothing to do with you. It's because our attitude and actions get born out of our ideas of who we are, our self-image. And somebody gave her the idea that her value is tied to how she looks. So she walked out of here in that miniskirt because she thinks that's where her self-worth is. And he's like, you know where that came from? That our ideas of who we are come from our understanding of what is true and what is a lie. And the truth is, she had some lies in the garden of her heart that came from her very, very difficult, traumatic childhood. Someone had lied to her about who she was, and she believed that lie, and then it influenced her attitude and actions. And I was spending all my time at the top of the tree. And he said, you need to help identify what lies are in the garden of her heart and do everything you can to replace those lies with truths. Like, kind of, who cares what she's wearing right now? That is the tip of the iceberg. He said, did you become a foster parent so that you could, tell her how to dress? I'm like, not at all. And so he gave me a prescription, which would have to be adjusted for the amount of time that you see kids in your children's ministries. But he told me not to talk to her at all about her attitude and actions unless she was going to hurt herself or somebody else, and to spend all of my airtime talking to her about things I knew that were biblically true. And I'm just going to confess to you all, it was harder than I thought it would be. And I know my Bible really well, but I would have to go to it in the morning, like, oh, Lord, give me something I can give her. And we had a lot of opportunities in the days to come where that happened. Like one day she came home with all this homework that she was, it was a project that was due the next day. And I was struggling so much with her and that. And I wanted to say to her, like, how long have you known about this? And this is pretty much all your fault. But that would have produced shame, right? So I didn't even appropriately apply the verse in Colossians chapter 1, but I said, you know what? He's before all things, and in him all things hold together. Let's get started. And I could give you dozens of those examples, but what happened over time is what the Bible says, that God's word is like, it's like honey. It's sweet to the taste. And when I put more of God's words in my mouth, she would walk into a room and be attracted to that taste versus repelled by the things I was telling her about her attitude and actions. And it was a glimpse for me to what the late Dr. Karen Purvis would later say, that there's always meaning behind behavior. So when you're seeing some kind of behavior in your children's ministry, if you could just have the discernment and self-control to say to yourself, man, I have a strong reaction to whatever attitude and action I'm looking at right now, but I'm going to trust that instead of having a reaction to that, I'm going to be curious about what's driving that behavior. What is the meaning behind that behavior? An easy way to create connection with your child is without saying a single word. Like if you don't even really know what to say, it's a practice called behavior matching. And when we do the same activity, or even sit when they sit, stand in the stand, doing the same thing as they do, our brains just naturally, this is brain science, they connect. And we give the person whose behavior matching we're doing a sense of belonging. We don't even have to say a word. So if I'm trying to connect with someone and that person's sitting on the ground, I'll sit on the ground. Or if they're coloring a picture, I'll color a picture. or if they're cleaning up the toys or sweeping the floor, I'll pick up toys and grab a broom. Simply doing an activity next to the person with whom you're trying to create a connection, whom you're trying to co-regulate, whom you're trying to be curious about, whom you're trying to minister to. It creates connection. So if we know connection is where healing happens, then suddenly really every interaction we have is an opportunity for healing. And I think that brings hope. That's a hopeful way to do it. There's a quote by Abraham Maslow. You probably remember him if you ever took any of those classes, that says, when the only tool you have is a hammer, you see every problem as a nail. And we do have more than carrots and sticks in our toolbox. It isn't behavior to be fixed. Remember, it's hearts that need healing. And it took me personally a long time to understand what it meant to join in with God's work of healing a child. I mean, I worked for 15 years in the orphan and vulnerable child world before I really understood trauma. I mean, one of the programs that we have at our ministry is that we help take aging out kids, ages 15 to 22, usually through high school and college, that would have never had the opportunity to do that. And we graduated this young man with an electrical engineering degree, and he got this great job. And he came to my house 6 weeks after he got his job, and we were going to be celebrating it. And he told my husband and I at that dinner he was going to quit. And I said, like, what do you mean you're going to quit? He's like, well, there's this guy, he follows me around all the time. He's always telling me what to do, and he drives me crazy. And my husband's like, is he your boss? He's like, yes, he's my boss. And all of a sudden we looked at each other and we're like, oh my gosh, we graduated a highly discipled, well-educated, emotional train wreck. We had given him, he knew all his Bible stories because he had been in a discipleship program. He got the grades he needed in order to graduate with his degree, but we never addressed the trauma in his heart. And so we would come to find out he couldn't sustain relationships. He couldn't take instruction. He couldn't ask for help. There were all kinds of evidences of trauma, but we didn't even know what we were looking at. So we took this deep dive into academia, where all the best content around trauma is. That's where they're constantly learning and doing studies and findings about relationship and healing and brains and all of that. But we needed that content in lay language for the places we serve around the world, and for me to give away for free, like I was trying to at the beginning of our call, to people like you. So we eventually created some curriculum that was in simpler language that helped give tips and tricks towards connection and healing. And at first it was just for us, and we began to see some remarkable results. And we thought that the results that we were going to be looking for were evidences of healing in children, like they could sustain relationships, they could manage conflict, they could ask for help, they could try again after failure, they like all they could manage their emotions. But what we found as we began to do trauma training together as a community is that the adults were the ones who were getting tools in their tool belts that were allowing them to stick around. We had a program for students. We entered a child into one of these programs. We had ministry programs for kids, and this young man was really disruptive. I don't know if you've ever had someone like that enter into your children's ministry, but when we were supposed to sit, he wanted to stand. When it was time to eat, he wasn't hungry. When it wasn't time to eat, he was asking for food. He was touching all the people around him. Just imagine the most disruptive version you could ever imagine. And the teachers in his space were amazing. They were like patient and kind, and they did all the right things in all the right ways. And I was watching him, occasionally observing him. And anyway, one day somebody came and ran and got me because they told me that the teachers in the room had lost their minds. And I went in to find out they were right. The adults were going crazy. And the kids who were not used to seeing the adults go crazy in the classroom were going crazy. And the only person in the room that was calm was this particular disruptive child. He was calm as a cucumber. And I said to him, hey, what's going on, buddy? And he said, finally, I can breathe. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, these people are so nice all the time. They're so calm and quiet and controlled. And I literally felt like I was suffocating. He had created such a disruption that it blew up the room. And now that the room was more like what he has always known people to behave like, he was like, now I'm in my natural habitat. Now everything feels right. And I said to those teachers, here's what our work is. Our work is that little boy has a set point of chaos. That feels like normal to him. And now we have to change his set point. And there were lots of ways we went to work doing it. One of the first things we did is I told those parents, we know because of what happens in our brains when we get told yes, releases serotonin and dopamine. It's amazing. In fact, if I only had 2 minutes of a webinar with you and all I could give you was one tip, I would say to you, the 2 ways we know fastest that our hearts, our minds heal is through listening and play. So we know from studies that the brain scan of a child being heard, having the full attention of someone, even if it's not someone they're in a relationship, their brains register exactly like they are getting some affection from someone they know and love. So if you're getting a hug from someone you know and love, your brain looks exactly like if you're getting the full attention of someone. It's being heard and being loved feels the same way to a child. So one of the fastest ways that you can co-regulate a child or foster healing in a child who have had trauma is to listen to them. And the second one is to play. And in that listening and play, we know that dopamine and serotonin is released when they hear the word yes. So say yes as often as you can. Like, can I have a snack? Yes, as soon as you finish what we're working on right now. Or maybe you can give it to them right away. And if you can, you should do it. Or can I be the teacher today? Yes, as soon as I finish my lesson, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Or can I mean, think of all the things the kids ask you throughout the course of your ministry. If you can turn the question around so that you can say yes, you release all the right things in their brains. That's good for them. The second thing is they need what's called attachment and orientation. They need to know where they are in a space and how that space works. So at the very beginning, saying, okay, today we're going to do 4 things. We're going to listen to a story, and then we're going to do a craft, and then we're going to get in small groups, and then we'll finish with some play or whatever your plan is. They need to know, how is this next hour going to work? Because the surprise element is not good for someone with a trauma history. It's triggering to them. So we need to attach them. You need to always say, hey, even if they've heard it 10 times, hey, I want to remind you, my name is Beth, and I'll be talking today about whatever I'm going to talk about. And this is my helper, and his name is Peter, and he's going to be with us today too. And if you have any questions, you can ask me, Beth, or him, Peter. And if you need to use the restroom, here's how you can do it. And don't worry, because we're going to have a snack. It's going to come right after our story time. And if you can write that down, or you can show images, anything you can do to foster both orientation of what is about to happen and attachment, here are the safe people you can go to. That is the very, very best gift you can give any child from a trauma history, because if you don't, they get hypervigilant. They get kind of on edge. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next. And just in case it's not good, I need to be ready for a fight or a flight or a freeze. And then you want to give them options, as many options as you possibly can, because kids who have a trauma history, part of the problem is that things have happened to them that they had no say in. So even options like, would you like a red pen or a green pen? Would you like 3 goldfish or 7 goldfish? Would you like to have your drink now or after our story? Would you like to sit or stand while I share this? Would you like, give them options. It gives them a sense of control in their environment. And every time you ask them what they want and they tell you, and then you do that, you respond in a positive way, you build connection between you. They start to trust you. That adult set does exactly what they say. And if there's going to be a change, because change happens, like, okay, we were going to go in the big room, but now we're not because, there's a water leak, or we were going to have our snack, but we ran out of time, or what, things happen in ministry life. If there's going to be a change, don't just let them go with the flow. Don't just assume that everyone is fine with or understands what's happening in your mind. be as clear as you can with them to say, hey, here is exactly what was going to happen. We were going to sing songs with the class next door, but they are still busy working on their craft. So instead, we're going to sing it by ourselves. Is that okay with you guys? And even their verbal affirmation of that is healthy for them. It's so good for them to be able to hear. Yes, they have a sense of something's happening that was unpredictable, but I have been informed, I'm attached and oriented to what's going to happen. And as you begin to practice those and many other tips we can talk about in our next few minutes, what you're going to do is grow resilience in them. And I'm just going to explain to you what's happening in that amygdala that we were talking about, because when anybody has had a traumatic experience, whether it's acute or complex, meaning it's happened over a period of time, or it could be an acute trauma, like their house had a fire, or somebody was in a car accident, or complex developmental trauma, which means what I was saying earlier, good things didn't happen or bad things did happen. Then here's what happens. Trauma leads to people living in that fear brain. They feel overwhelmed. They can feel like their lives are in danger. They can feel like they're on their own. It's up to them. They better defend themselves. And they cannot trust people or build healthy relationships. And in that fear brain, in order to protect themselves, this is the next slide, they use these 5 tactics: manipulation, triangulation, aggression, violence, and control. And maybe you've seen some of that behavior in your classrooms. And remember, those are expressions, those are anger expressions typically, but they're sitting on top of somebody is afraid. Someone is afraid, and we want to help give them the tools to reduce their fear so they can articulate their needs, and then we can be a part of helping meet them. Resilience, this ability to bounce when things are hard. It's the ability to adapt well when faced with adversity. It's specific behaviors and thoughts and actions that allow a person to overcome challenges. And probably this is the most important part. These behaviors, thoughts, actions, they can be learned at anyone at any point in life. So you may begin to get trauma training through this, or even gain an awareness and understanding of what trauma behaviors look like. And you may go, well, I'm seeing this in my adult volunteer. I'm seeing this in my coworker. I'm seeing this in myself. I'm seeing this in my spouse. The good news is God made our brains to heal. And remember, the 2 fastest ways to healing is to be listened to and to be played with. Resilience is learned and it's grown through protective factors. When present, these protective factors protect against the negative impact of trauma, and they can increase someone's ability to overcome their challenging circumstances. And so we know there are good ingredients to add and increase that are like resilience builders. And they can help people over time become more and more resilient. Because what we want is, at the end, we want kids to feel so good about being in your classroom, so good about being around your safe adults, that they come back again and again. And that behaviors you see in September, you don't see in December. Behaviors you see in December, you don't see in April. And that over time, the act of being around safe, healing adults in the environment that they will associate with God, it's like a gift you give them for the rest of their lives. Resilience is more than the ability to bounce back. We really want anyone who's experienced a trauma history to learn how to adapt, overcome, and be able to move forward. And so we need safe and supportive people in our lives. One of the resilience factors is supportive relationships, which is what we just talked about. Like, we need supportive relationships that give us a sense of belonging. Self-esteem, that's that center part, that self-image of that tree, that helps shape our belief systems. And we shape someone's belief system through positive words and positive experiences. So even things that you say, like, you're so kind, or you're a hard worker, or you can do it, or experiences like they complete their art project, or they learn a new skill, or any of those activities that you can do in your classroom, foster a strengthening of that self-image, the center of that tree trunk, so that the attitudes and actions that come out of it flow from those positive words and positive experiences. Mental flexibility, this is the ability to pivot, right? Mental flexibility is the ability to change course when something is like blocking our way, or a plan gets changed. Like, maybe we were going to do something outside, but then it started to rain. for all of us, we have to have mental flexibility to pivot to a different plan. Like you were supposed to have a co-teacher with you in class and they ended up not showing up. You as an adult need some mental flexibility to be like, how am I going to pull off this whole classroom by myself? And that flexibility requires that prefrontal cortex we talked about, where you have creative thinking and problem solving and cause and effect. And so the more we can help kids stay out of that amygdala activity and up here in their prefrontal cortex, that mental flexibility, this will help them. And that those are things we can help them practice and grow. So let's just say you have a change of plans in your classroom, like you're supposed to go outside, but you're not, or you're going to have this snack, but it ran out, or you were going to show a video, but the thing doesn't work, or what, any of the many of things that can happen in our ministries. Walking them through, here's what we're going to do to try to pivot. Here's what we're going to do instead. Here's where then just even post-processing that afterwards and said, that was really fun. I'm really glad we got to read that story. Maybe next time we'll watch that video. Or I'm really glad we got a chance to try this new snack because I didn't realize I liked it. Or I'm really glad that we stayed inside this time because we probably would have gotten muddy, but next time we'll have to spend more time outside, or whatever your debriefing looks like. All of that helps build inside of a child mental flexibility, which is a beautiful gift to give someone who's experienced a trauma history. Okay, lastly is being future focused. So resilience grows when we believe there's a good future ahead of us. So anybody in a trauma history is either focused on the things that have happened historically, or they're thinking only about the here and now because they're in survival mode. They're not building anything for the future. And we want to help people be able to begin to look forward to something. We want them to be able to plan for something. If a person's living in survival mode, just trying to focus on how to survive any particular day, it's impossible for them to imagine a good future. So we can intentionally increase this protective factor by encouraging them to dream about the future, asking them good, open-ended questions, exposing them to new things, new people, new places, new possibilities, and then cheering them on when they even set short-term goals that can be accomplished in the hour they are in your Sunday school class. Like, what are you hoping to draw today? Or what are you hoping to build over here? Or what are you hoping to learn today? Or what, giving them the anticipation that something's going to happen. And then the affirmation when it does happen is building that future focus muscle, which is a gift we give kids who have experienced trauma. It ends up bridging over to the muscle that says, I know that there are hard things that happen in your story, but it's not the end, and they don't decide what's happening. You have power to decide about the things that are happening. Okay, Danielle, I see a good question for you. I like the idea of saying yes instead of no and not right now, but sometimes tricky when it's a child that constantly needs a drink to use the bathroom. How do you balance the misuse of saying yes privileges? I would probably, especially if a child is asking consistently, they're looking for a touch point. Like they're maybe they have a medical condition, but short of that, they're really just looking for a hit of attention. So I would probably over air initially and giving them a drink every single time because you're really wanting to fill that cup. And maybe even saying, like let's say they were trying to leave the room to get a drink, bring them a water bottle and just say, you can take as many drinks off of this whenever you want to. I brought a water bottle just for you. I put water over, and even preempting it. I know last time you asked for drinks this week, I got some drinks for you and I'm going to set it over here. And anytime you want it, you don't even need to ask me. You can just go do it. Or if a child is trying to use the bathroom all the time, I would go there. I would go with them as often as they want. They're really trying to say, I need to escape from that classroom setting. I want one-on-one time with you. There's something and so in that one-on-one, well, hopefully you're not one-on-one, hopefully you're two-on-one or something because of child protection policies. But as you are leaving the room or as you are meeting the need that they're asking about, use that time as your detective time to have conversation with them, to be curious about them. And then if you're doing the future focus thing, like, okay, as soon as we get back in the room, you know what we're going to do next? Or are you sure you need to go? Because if you go, you're going to miss this. And I would hate for you to miss this. Do you want to wait and do that first? And then we can see if you still need to go. Like continuing to reframe so that they feel like the most exciting thing is happening in the room. And if that is overwhelming, if they're asking to leave the room a lot, they may need some kind of fidget, or look at those co-regulation cards that we gave out at the beginning of the session for free. Like they may actually need something to help them co-regulate so that they can be in the room. Because when they can't, they just escape seems like the path of least resistance to them. Are there any tips that to start connecting with kids who refuse to be involved in new tasks? I guess silence and withdrawal can be a kind of communication. Absolutely. I would give them as much control as possible. Like, let's say a new task might be whatever the task is. I like they don't want to eat the snack. They don't want to play the game, whatever. I would try to make them your assistant. Like, will you help me pass out the snacks? It's okay if you don't want to eat it, but it's helpful for me to have a buddy to pass it out. And would you be willing to help me? Or we're going to play a game today. Can I tell you what it is before I tell the classroom? Let me just tell you, let me let you know, we're going to play this game. We're going to pass around a ball. Do you want to practice for a minute with me before we play it as a whole team? Would you like to, I would think as much as you can about how you might be able to set that child up to have as few unknowns and surprises as possible. Or, hey, next week we're going to sing a new song. Can I send that song home with you so that you can hear it before you come back next week? Or, hey, we're going to have a new volunteer, and his name is going to be Scott. And can I tell you a few things about Scott before he joins our classroom next week? Or what, just information, orientation, and attachment, practice, and then give them a special role. And then if after all of that, they still don't want to participate, give them the freedom and the control to say, I'd like to pass. I'm not going to answer. I think I'll sit out this game. I'm not hungry right now. And then if you think of it like a spectrum, in the beginning, they're just refusing, but then over time you can say, would you rather sit out this game or would you rather play? And then all of a sudden they realize their only choice is not to sit out. They actually have a choice. Would you like to sit out this game or would you like to hold the whistle? Would you like to sit out this game or would you like to buddy up with Stephanie and do it? Would you like to sit out this game? Whatever, all the things. Just give them choices and control and walk them towards full participation. That would probably be my answer. Okay, we only have a few minutes left. Byron, did you want to see if anybody had any other questions for me?
Yeah, people, any questions? Gosh, Beth, this has been so, so good. So good. Any other questions, folks? Well, people are thinking and perhaps going to throw some questions in here. Um, children's ministry, Beth, I mean, what I love about you, it's many things. You just so know our context in children's ministry. And then you bring this forte, this mind of trauma, and they just go well hand in hand. And this is true. A lot of our children's pastors, directors on this call, and then those who are going to see this in the future, children's ministry, it is beyond a gigantic ministry. Whether you have 25 kids in your ministry, praise God, and 5 volunteers, or you have 500 or 1,000, and you have more volunteers and more leaders that you're working with to reach those volunteers, to reach those kids. You scale this, and then you look at the trauma. I mean, is there really more trauma happening with people, children today than 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I don't know. We're asking our volunteers, I'm going to try to find a question in here, but we're asking our volunteers, Beth, to do so much stuff. And we're asking our children's pastor directors to do so much stuff. But it seems like Beth Guckenberger, children's pastor at my church in Chicagoland, you've got to hover above the fray and you've got detective work. I love that, Beth. You've got you've got to find those children and families who are dealing with some trauma, and then you need to be getting these free resources, and not using, would you agree, Beth, not using them with everyone deeply, but when you acknowledge there is a family that's extremely broken and they're coming, number one, thank God. Number two, as a children's pastor, I have got to help Courtney, who's working with his child, because if this child is not connected with, how many times have we heard the word connection, connection, connection?
That's where healing
The,
happens.
the, the child is just pushed to the side, and he or she will go through life where they've just been pushed to the side. And what could be the worst place to be pushed to the side
In the
is in
church.
the church, where Jesus is saying, I do my best work with children who have been pushed to the side. So help me find a question here. Where do we go with this when it's so dadgum overwhelming? Uh, in whatever scale, size of ministry we're in. You get me?
I do. I absolutely do. First of all, let's just remember that Abraham Maslow quote, when the only tool you have is a hammer, you see every problem as a nail.
Yeah, that's so
So
good.
like let's remember that there's a lot going on at any given time with any particular child. And so we just need to have a whole tool belt full of tools. So because sometimes a child is really grieving. I mean, lots of times anger looks like grieving. It's
Mhm,
there's
mhm,
and what we really want is for a child to have the impression that my church is a safe place full of safe adults. And when I'm there, I feel safe.
mhm,
I feel good.
mhm,
Um, oh, okay, Byron, I
mhm.
see a question I want to answer
Yeah,
as we
yeah,
have
please.
2 minutes
Yeah,
left.
jump on it. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, One wall I run into is that I'm not in the room every week with those
Yeah,
kiddos, and the personalities who volunteer aren't just always willing or able to follow through with tips like this, like a patient. I
yeah.
would come up with this is a really fast in 3 minutes. And the trauma training does give some of these tips, but we call them life scripts. So like a couple of phrases that are repeated. So at back to back, we talk about no hits, no hurts, stick together and have fun. Those are just 3 little life scripts. And it drives the culture of the volunteers who maybe don't have all the elaborate training that some of you on
Right.
staff might eventually get, but
Yeah.
we want to reinforce a couple of ideas. I would definitely make sure every volunteer understands about attachment and orientation so that they start every hour or however long your time is with them with an
Sure.
understanding of what's to come,
Mhm,
and that they know how to ask for help. If a volunteer feels like, I hate to ask for help from you, the professional, because I want to look like I can handle this classroom, then they may just rely on their own parenting techniques or what they saw on Instagram or TikTok about how to do it. Like, you want them to know if something's escalating in your classroom, just ask for help. We have some of us that have had advanced training and we're more prepared to help you de-escalate a situation or calm a child down. Just make sure that no adult volunteer feels shame for asking for help. That is a wonderful thing for them to be able to do so that you can understand where the places are in your ministry that are kind of hurting or hot. Um,
mhm,
how do
mhm.
you deal with the
Yeah.
fatigue of ministering to broken families? I mean,
Ugh,
yeah,
yeah.
I think that I would acknowledge it. I think I would just those families, what do they need? They need to be listened to and they need to be played with. Serotonin and dopamine release in their brains too. And so even just making sure that you set aside time to listen to them goes a long way to feeling like my church is a safe place full of safe people. And when I'm in it, I feel safe.
Yeah.
That's where healing and learning happens.
Yeah. 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 Beth, fantastic.
What a
Oh, I
joy.
wish.
What a
Yeah.
joy.
You know what I really, what I really gathered. How do you boil this down, distill this down into simplicity? You can't. This is a critical issue, but it really is children's pastor, detective work, identify, and be proactive.
Mhm.
That all these tips, Beth G, that you gave, they're all proactive. And we have always been trained in Christian ed, that classroom management, if you don't have a plan, they'll come up with one, and you're probably going to have some issues. So, children's pastors, this is the ministry. There's nothing easy about this, but this is the calling on your life. You be the one. You lead a ministry that detects, identifies, works individually with these volunteers, uh, and be proactive with these tips that Beth has given us is golden. And you're going to absolutely love all this stuff as you get the replay and you begin to set with the proper people, your team for sure. I'm going to have Beth close this out. Beth, we love you. Our people love you.
I get you.
You're a very unique kind of person. I've told you that many times, but today I heard you really teach today, and you taught beautifully, and we're so, so grateful. Our next, closing out the series on trauma will be on October 23 with another incredible voice, and that is Melissa McDonald. And she is going to be talking to us about just protecting the vulnerable, protecting volunteers as well, just bringing a spirit, Beth, of protection to the ministry, because there is no greater evil than Satan, who is wanting to destroy everything that the church is trying to do. You see it very close right now happening around our world. So we hope to see you again on October 23, and we'll be getting the invites out to you soon. We're going to go a few minutes over, but you know something? Sometimes it's just necessary. Beth, again, pray over us and these people who have taken time to hear from you today, please, and then we'll be finished. Thank you.
Jesus, it's with all the authority that I have as a co-heir with you and together in this virtual room full of saints that I ask you release an anointing over
Yes,
every adult that's listening,
yes, Father.
that as they have their own prefrontal cortexes, their own
Mhm.
amygdala responses, their own trees and their own lives and their own
Yes, yes,
gardens, Lord Jesus, would you first heal us? Would you
yes.
give us your presence and your peace, Lord? We love you and we trust you with our own lives, our own families, and the ministries you've asked us to steward. And we pray these things in your holy, precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. And again, Beth, I think you got an invite to come to Kenya, so you better get your
Okay.
ticket and
Okay. Sounds
freshen up
wonderful.
that test. I
Hey,
love
bye.
that. Bye, y'all. Love y'all. Go do the work. Go